Welcome to the Divorce View Talk Show. Hello, it's Joanie Winberg, certified human behavior consultant, divorce mentor, and founder of GettingAlongSolutions.com. It's always my honor to do this show with my co-host, Rosalind Sedacca. Hello, Ros, and welcome again.
Hi, Joanie. Good to see you again. I'm Rosalind Sedacca. I'm recognized as the voice of child-centered divorce, the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and author of How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce. And we're here today to talk about a topic that I don't think any human being can avoid, and one that's especially significant during the divorce process, and that's stress. So why don't you introduce our wonderful guest today?
Yes, today our guest is Kristen Lee Costa, known as Dr. Kris, and she's actually a leading faculty member at the University of Northeastern in Boston, and we're thrilled to have her here. She's also an educator, a researcher, and author of the book called Reset, Make the Most of Your Stress. So we're really excited to get started. So welcome, Dr. Kris.
Thank you so much, Joanie and Roz. It's wonderful to be here with both of you today.
And tell us a little bit more about you and what compelled you to write a book called, as far as Reset, Make the Most of Your Stress.
Well, like the both of you, I've really had the privilege of working with a lot of folks over time. In my clinical role as a clinical social worker, I've had the privilege to work with a lot of families who are experiencing divorce or other life transitions or losses. And in that, what I find the most is that when people come to my door, sometimes they've waited a little bit too long, and oftentimes they really finding themselves needing practical strategies. And so in that, I really wanted to develop, a model and a framework that could be used in the everyday, with all the competing priorities and the demands, and then you throw in the difficult circumstances of divorce. People really need something that they can sink their teeth into and apply in the day-to-day stressors.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Could you give us an example maybe from your book as far as maybe something that someone could take away today? And then we certainly always want them to learn more about your book, but maybe give them a little taste of what you feel that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So the reset is actually based on an acronym. And so today as we get talking, I'd like to share some of the key pieces of that. But one of the best things I can tell our audience today is that self-care is truly a vital process. And I think we hear that word. It's starting to gain traction in terms of people understanding what that involves. But self-care is a process, and the way that I can think about it the best is that when you go on an airplane, they often will tell you to put your mask on first, and that will help you to be able to sustain yourself, but also to serve those around you. And I think in a situation when someone's going through a divorce especially, people end up feeling really depleted and overwhelmed. It's a huge thing to have to endure. And so it's important to be able to think about, in the middle of all of that, what are some key strategies that I can employ? And what I always like to say is there's not a one-size-fits-all formula. I think sometimes we want that 3-step formula or the 5-step thing. Reset is not a cookie cutter. And what it is it allows for more of a fluid model, a way that you can think about, what's unique to me? What are the things that really keep me up at night? What are the stressors that are pressing upon me? And what do I know about myself? In addition to thinking about what's not working well, what's working well? What are the things I can leverage, the resources I have within myself and around me that I can take advantage of? And I think that a lot of times we forget that part of the conversation, right?
Absolutely. So I'm really eager to hear what the RESET acronym is. Can you share that with us?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So again, the first step is called realize. And in clinical terms, we have a fancy way of calling this perspective taking. And the best way I could describe it to everyone is thinking about a movie set. You think about a movie director, and what do? They come out and they say, take one. And then, of course, something happens and they have to redo it. And then that's the second take. So the first take would be known as a primary appraisal. So that's the point. Again, think about the divorce process. There's already so much that has likely transpired that's been difficult to work through. And that can produce a lot of really raw emotions that are hard to digest. So the primary appraisal, I often say to people, this is not the best time to try to make a blanket judgment on your life or to try to overanalyze yourself, this is just messy. It's not going to be, you know, neat and pretty. It's going to be messy. And then as time goes on, what we know from the research in resilience, you know, a lot of my experiences in looking at resilience, both in the people that I have the privilege to work with and in all of my research, we know that over time, again, we can identify some more of those resources. And we can move to what's known as a secondary appraisal stage. So again, that's that take two, where, again, we're able to sort of come up for air a bit and see things in a new perspective. So that's the realize. The second part is energize. And energize involves a variety of things. And again, the key thing is to think about in your mind's eye right now, what energizes me? You know, for some of us, it's just as simple as walking. I love to walk. And Tom Hartman is one of my favorite writers who he talks about all of the neuroscientific benefits of walking. And essentially, when we walk, we can move through problems in a new way. And so, you know, physical movement and exercise is not just about fitting into our jeans. It's really about, you know, moving through problems. It's about getting that fresh air. It's about working through things. And again, as I've said, this isn't prescriptive. So some of us, our movement might just be that we have time to do some deep breathing in a day. Others of us like to go and crank out a good run. There's lots of ways to bring that movement and to give our systems that reset or recalibration.
I know myself. I was just going to say, I know myself when I was going through it. If I caught a cat nap for 10 minutes, I felt so recharged, and it was just all I needed. And so, like you said, it's whatever fits you at the situation at the time.
Exactly, Joanie. That's a great example, and that's definitely embedded in the energizing step, the notion of rest and leisure. And I think so many of us, you know, in our culture, we wear that badge of busyness, and we sometimes are afraid to say we took a nap or we took some time just to do nothing. I think that's kind of a rare commodity, but that replenishment that we get from those activities helps sustain us. And I think we sometimes overlook that. That, you know, by really recharging our batteries, if you will, it means a lot. So that's certainly the rest and sleep. I mean, so many of us are sleep deprived. It's hard to find someone that's not. So just that notion of sleeping and recharging and what we put into our bodies and how we move our bodies means a tremendous amount.
Absolutely.
So that also connects with the S. So the S stands for soothe. And one thing I think a lot about in my work, I think a lot about I don't want to paint a grim picture, but we really have a lack of mental health integration in our society. And we're really facing a lot of areas that have critical shortages. We're facing health issues like obesity and addiction rates. And there's this whole brew, there's this whole mix that's really become very toxic. And a lot of that relates to the fact that when we're in distress, so picture, you know, going through the stages and all the mud and mire of a divorce, you know, when we're in that, we're going to want to soothe ourselves. We're not going to say at that moment, wow, we're embracing this suffering and these are great times. We're going to want to do something to recalibrate. So that's what soothing is about. Now, soothing can happen either adaptively, so again, it might be something like walking or just really sitting with your cup of tea and really enjoying that, or laughing it out with a great friend. But it also can be maladaptive, so things like I've mentioned, like food addictions and obesity. And one thing that's really a concern for me is the rate of women in our age bracket who are being prescribed antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications. 1 in 4 is the current statistic. Wow. And in the U.S., believe it or not, we're only one of 2 countries who allow what's known as a DTC, a direct consumer advertisement for medications. So, you know, years ago, we didn't turn on the TV and see commercials for Cymbalta and the whole 9 yards. And they're really targeting, just like we used to get really, and we still should, get frustrated about the way we're targeting kids on food and tobacco and alcohol. They're targeting women and men, but primarily women, to say, you know, we're depressed when it might be that we're just going through a divorce or a difficult life transition, and they're making it seem like these medications are like candy. And that's a concern. That's a real concern. So again, that whole notion of soothing, how do we recalibrate? Medication can really be an option that's important. And so I'm not against medication altogether, but it has to be well thought out. And we really have an issue sometimes of overdiagnosis and underdiagnosis in our country that's really causing a lot of trouble for people, where then maybe they're not able to engage in some of these healthy behaviors that are wrapped into this reset model that could actually help them be healthier in the long run without side effects and so forth.
So you're talking about healthy soothing versus toxic soothing, so to speak.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have our S. What is next?
So the last two are the E and the T. And the E stands for end unproductive thinking. Now, I don't know if you're familiar. There's a Stanford psychologist who talked about rumination. And this is kind of a key clinical term. And that's that whole notion of just being stuck in our thoughts and just kind of processing and processing to the point of no return. And that could really be unproductive. So, you know, sometimes you could think about it like, what is renting space in my head? What are the things that are really consuming my thought process? And is it really helpful? Those are the types of questions, I think, that we need to ask ourselves a lot when we kind of get stuck in that. And it's easier said than done. But what I think about a lot is, what if we were to take all of that time, think about time like a budget or a precious commodity or a resource. If we're spending it just, you know, in that whole treadmill, what could we have been doing otherwise? So when we think about unproductive thinking, again, when we're in that primary appraisal or that first take stage, it's raw, it's messy, it's difficult. But when we're in that mode, if we can switch gears and start to think about what might we replace this type of thought process with? Is it that we, you know, engage in something like this, like watching an amazing podcast with experts who can really feed your soul and nourish you at that given moment? Is it reading a certain book that can be edifying? Is it watching a TED Talk? I don't know about you, but just watching TED Talks really electrifies me. Is it just engaging in a hobby you like and learning, like, say, photography or something new? But it's that productive thinking and productive activities that can really be very freeing to participate in.
I do see people where they just get so stuck. And what's really scary is that they've been stuck, I call it in the muck, for so long. It's like this is their normal lifestyle. So all of a sudden, it's really difficult for people. I know myself, years ago, I went through the divorce. It was just getting outdoors and breathing the fresh air, and especially now up here in the Northeast, when we get that smell of spring, it's like you're reborn again. But just feeling nature, it can be very simple, like you said. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be, just trying to help yourself shift, even if it's just a little bit, is still better than being in the muck. But do you find that through your research and then also working with a lot of people through these challenges that it is hard for them because they've been living this way normally all their life a lot?
I think that definitely plays a role, but specifically to the divorce process, again, what leads up to a divorce and, being perhaps in a toxic situation or just in an unhealthy situation that has held them hostage in a sense, where, again, I think overwhelmingly in my experiences, what I help to try to uncover is, some of the root issues. And sometimes it's that someone is really, crumbling, or they're kind of falling apart at the seams with, either some depression situation going on or just a lot of anxiety bubbling over. And when that person goes unhelped, so they go either uncoached or untreated, or they're not able to sort of recalibrate and find the help around them, then that can become toxic, and that can really hold everybody in that situation hostage. So I think that, to your point, people can feel stuck and kind of like, I got to keep chewing on this, or just kind of keep playing that old record over and over again.
Especially, I was just going to say, especially if they haven't had any role models in their life, and you see with their toxic parents and so forth, so they don't really even know how to do this. So I can see what you're saying. Yes.
I remind clients often, don't believe everything you think. because we are really deceiving ourselves into thinking that everything that spins through our minds is real and legitimate and valid and vital, and we don't understand that we get into these stress loops where we're just negative thinking spirals and spirals, and it sends us down the drain in the wrong direction. So something has to stop it. And
That's right.
Yes,
it's that foot spoke, you know.
Exactly. So we have one more letter, the T.
Yes, and I love how you both just put that. And again, I think it's like, how do you disrupt sometimes what might be a very entrenched pattern, something that might be intergenerational, or just, so it's really being thoughtful and saying, what is it that I might do now to disrupt this process? Because it's not very helpful, that's for sure. So to the T is about talk it out. And really that's about connection. And what I find, again, and just having the privilege of working with so many people through the divorce process, is very isolating. Again, it's this whole expectation. Sometimes hopes and dreams are shattered, and there's a whole lot to manage. Sometimes it's managing your own emotions, and very often that sometimes falls to the wayside because it's managing everybody else's emotional process, family members, children, and that can really be overwhelming and isolating. So talk it out is about connecting. And I don't know if either of you enjoy the Seinfeld show, but for anyone who likes Seinfeld, his neighbor Kramer used to always barge in and kind of have a big rant of the day. And a lot of times in that scenario, he would just kind of, debrief and jump on Jerry. And then at the end of it, he'd say, wow, I feel better. And there's really a power in that ability to be listened to. And I think that's something that, again, from a cultural context perspective, we're losing sight on that ability to really listen to one another. And so talk it out is about finding strong, healthy people to be in relationship with. And that can come on all different planes and levels. So it might be that you find a therapist or a coach where you have that objective and really caring person who you can lean into and you can really be very open with, and they're going to give you a lot of accountability and a lot of support and help you set goals and meet those goals. In other situations, it might be a friend that maybe has gone through a divorce or a difficult circumstance that you can lean into. But finding community and not going alone is a really important part of this model, because I think that's something that, again, in the busyness of today, we're all kind of chasing our tails. And I was at a cafe recently and I saw, it was very sad, I saw this little tea bag that said, I don't have time to visit with you, so here's this tea bag instead. And I'm thinking, like, we can't even get together and have a cup of tea anymore. So the notion of connecting and being able to talk it out is really important. And
to feel like you're not alone, I think that's probably the biggest thing we all hear, and they're reaching out, is that we're not alone, and I don't want to feel alone, and they're just happy to connect with a group that they can vent or at least share some, different situations.
Absolutely.
Now,
I think
you do want to guide people into that talk out process with more conscious people, because if they're talking it through with family, friends, or neighbors who are directing them down the old path that you're trying to avoid, then they're right back in that vicious circle again. So you really want to choose wisely people who are taking responsibility for their lives and who are moving ahead and not just in the blame game and doing some of the behaviors that are not going to help us really move ahead and progress in our lives. Isn't that so?
I love how you just framed that. I think it's an excellent reminder for the viewers, is to really be thoughtful about who you're really leaning into, and that sometimes the people in our life, even though they have perhaps excellent motivations, even when that's true, sometimes again, there's that subjectivity, or there might be a little bit of an agenda involved, or they're just too close to the fire, and it's just hard for them to have full clarity, if you will. And so having, again, a balanced blend of people that you have in your support network. So again, it might be that it's a therapist and a coach, and you know that they serve a distinctive role in your recovery or your support process. And then you might have some friends also that they each play an integral role, or family members. But what I think is that sometimes if it's someone that's a bit subjective, or we don't have a diversified range of perspectives, sometimes that sort of stunts our growth. And I think really having a diverse range of perspectives and a lot of levels and layers of support can really be a huge facilitator of healing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to make sure, too, Dr. Kris, that people do know how to reach out to you as well as your book. So I know we have your website up there, but is that the best way, your website? If you want to repeat it, so that way you will be on the screen.
Sure. So, yes, and one thing that's happening, I'm really trying to build a conversation. So, as everyone knows, I just published the book back in late October. And again, this was born out of my clinical work, wanting to really give folks very user-friendly strategies. And then it's been really cultivated in my research at the university, in my classroom. I'm using it as a secondary reader in my classes. So I'm very proud of the fact that I have this book, and it's a real culmination of a lot of the work that I've done. But I'm also really interested in starting a conversation and sort of building community for people to have spaces to, again, understand they're not alone, and to be able to share wisdom and thoughts, and it might be raw, messy emotions. So, yes, my website is www.reset247.com, and I speak to a lot of groups. I speak to corporate groups, nonprofits, schools, lots of folks who just want really good strategies in terms of maintaining their well-being. But the other thing is, if people are into Twitter, I'm on Twitter and on Instagram, and those are in Facebook as well. And those are spaces you can go right to my website, and you can find all the social media avenues. And for all that it's worth, I think social media has a lot of downsides to it in terms of maybe we're not having the same quality of connections that we used to be able to. But I'll tell you, I've connected with some amazing people who are really trying to implement the reset in their lives, and they need those reminders for the journey. They need that constant sense of community, and that's one thing that I've really been blown away by, is this whole world that exists where we can really affirm one another and encourage one another, and kind of demonstrate those positive behaviors. I kind of have this dream about the whole thing of selfies. It's unbelievable to me, the selfies, and people even have selfie sticks now.
I don't know. I saw those.
Those are in full effect, but I think about selfie care, like. People are taking pictures of the good food that they're eating, and again, sometimes it can border on obnoxious, like where we just can't kind of just be present, but I mean, it's really great because people post pictures of working out and doing all those positive things, and I'm sure, we'll get down and roll up our sleeves and do a little research to see what kind of impact that has on healthy behavior. But anyway, I want everyone to know I would love to hear from you, through those vehicles, through Twitter, through Instagram. Those are great places to kind of get those reminders along the way and the support. And the book is available at all the retailers, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and indie books as well. So, I'd be thrilled if this podcast was a facilitation of someone getting to read it. And the thing about it is it really gives you something that's accessible. I am an avid reader. And I think one of the #1 questions people ask me is, what book would you recommend? And I wrote this book in the spirit of having read probably way too much literature out there. My nose has been in the books for a long time. And I wanted something that would be user-friendly, that would have the meat and substance that it needs to have a meaningful impact, but to also be fun. And right off the bat, when you read my story, I tell my own story. I don't just have the wisdom from the therapy room, but I also have it from my own experience, my own tendencies to burn the candle at both ends and work too hard and sometimes neglect my own self-care process. And in that, I learned the hard way. So I tell that story in the book about some eye-opening moments that kind of made me realize I've got to practice what I preach.
And I have read your book. It's great. What I like about it is that after you read it, then you can go back and pick out the part that you want to work on a little bit more, as far as talk it out, and then especially the part about the mindset and what goes on between the ears, and sometimes how that can really affect your whole day. And I have a great saying where I always and it's a common saying that it's pretty much out there that, you know, what you think about, you bring about. So that's always helped me really just tune in and be conscious of what I've been thinking, saying, wow, you know, I'm really got to get my thoughts together here, because I can see myself and hurting myself and affecting everyone around me. So I just love the way you zero in on that as well. It's a great book, super book.
Thank you, Joanie.
I was wondering if you have any questions that our viewers can ask themselves when they're dealing with challenging issues. Are there any ways to initiate some of this process by asking some questions to get the process started?
Yes, I think one of the greatest questions to ask is, you know, am I investing in my self-care process? Is that getting any attention? And if not, then what are some small things that I could implement? So again, there's a lot of choices here. And a lot of times small things make a big difference. It doesn't have to be a whole revamp and a whole elaborate plan. We know that those end up falling to the wayside very often because it's just too overwhelming. So what is it that, you know, the one thing that I might be able to do? And a lot of times it's very practical. Like, let's say you know you want to get your walk in, but the work day is busy. What if you just kept your sneakers in the car? You know, it's just making, or, you know, what does it mean to maybe pack your lunch ahead of time so you have a really great super salad for lunch instead of just eating things that are going to kind of drag you down? Or maybe, you know, am I drinking too much coffee? So it's that whole inventory, you know. What are with the unproductive thinking, you know, what are the things I'm spending the time? You know, monitor yourself. How much of your day are you spending kind of stuck in that mire? And then what would your goal be? You know, what would you picture it to look like? So just really starting with that process of asking yourself, you know, am I feeling my best? You know, and if not, what types of activities need a little bit of modification? Where can I start? What's the priority?
That's right.
And to me, it's learning to listen to that and not ignore it. I think that's
right.
The biggest thing, and that's where I'm just a big, if I can, I'm just a big person on naps, and I listen. If I can grab that, I grab it, because my body's saying you need it, and just that little bit. But like you're saying, be conscious of your eating and so forth, and exercise. And I know, Roz, you're a big person to go to the gym every day, so I mean, you're, you know, aware of that. That's what you need. So it's really being conscious of listening to the red flags that might be popping up for you. So once again, Dr. Kris, I'm just thrilled to have you on the show today. It's really been an honor. And also, once again, your website, so people can connect with you for your book, but also community-wise. Your website again?
Sure, it's reset24-7.com, and I would love to connect with lots of your wonderful viewers, who I know, again, you know, by them, just by the sheer force of them listening and watching, you know, wanting to strive, wanting to feel well. We all want to feel well, but again, sometimes it's not a clear-cut path on how to get there. And Absolutely. So thank you so much for this today. This is a wonderful conversation to have.
And great to have you on the show. And also to our listeners, as you know, go to divorceview.com. You can listen to this interview as many times as you like. Also, while you're there, there's great information and support from Roz and myself as well on different ways that we can support you during and after divorce. So, Roz, anything else you'd like to add before we have to go?
I just wanted to thank our guest. This was such an important conversation, and I'm very grateful that we had the opportunity to talk with you.
Likewise.
Thanks. And also to our listeners, tune in every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're always happy to have you here. Until next week, have a great week.